All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar event as a part of our Decreasing Family Homelessness Learning Community Group. I already introduced myself, but I'm Hyacinth McKinley. I am the Program Associate on our Learning Communities Resource Center project here at the National Office of Community Action Partnership, and we want to welcome you to today's event. So as we do, whenever we have a conversation together, both in person and online, we like to recite the promise of our network together. Because despite our different focus areas and the projects that we work on, the work that we do, our titles and positions, this is the thing that grounds us in our work in the 1,000 plus agencies of our network that are in 99% of communities across the United States. And it states that community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. All right, so a little bit about our project on the learning community. Basically, its purpose is to help the Community Action Network analyze outcomes and identify promising, effective, and innovative practice models that alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. In a simpler term, basically what we do in our project is we analyze different outcomes, service, and strategy approaches to help community action agencies build their capacity to fight poverty more effectively. And this is of critical importance because you see here on the screen the theory of change that guides the work of our network. We're really dedicated in our effort to make sure that across our different focus areas and the work that we're doing, that it is guided by these three goals and these core principles that you see here on the screen. And a lot of what we're talking about and helping agencies in our network think about is kind of that middle part where you see services and strategies. What we do is we analyze different approaches to these services and strategies to help agencies make sure that they are grounded in those principles and the ideals of our performance management so that we can achieve these three goals that you see at the top for families, organizations, and communities across the United States. So let's see. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So you can see here the various focus areas that we're looking at in this current cohort of the learning community. Of course, today you're joining us as a part of our Learning Community Group, or LCG, which discusses decreasing homelessness, but you can see some of our other focus areas today, and we try to tie in to all of these conversations some of the elements, some of those broader elements that are really grounded in the causes and conditions of poverty. So when you think about our performance management framework, our performance management framework, racial equity, trauma-informed care, all of those things, which are definitely important to our conversation today, we try to weave into all of the different focus areas that you see here on the screen to make sure that agencies are really pursuing, engaging, and innovating with holistic approaches to helping families and communities thrive together. So a little bit about our philosophy. The way that we do this is we think that if we can get a whole lot of people to make small changes in the way that they're doing, operating, or even thinking about their work, that can really result in some huge change across the country, across the counties in the United States. And we actually have a pretty wide footprint. If you look at participating members of the learning community, you can see here on the screen kind of all of those red states are places where we have community action agencies that are committed to this work and that are participating in this project with us. And you can see that's 33 states, 407 counties, and the potential to reach over 1.6 million people with the services that we're providing. So think about if we can get all of those people and all of those communities involved in making those small changes, that can result in some really big impact on eliminating poverty in our country. So, of course, I have to introduce the rest of our wonderful team across the Learning Communities Resource Center. You saw all those topic areas. There's no way that we could do all of that work and engage in thoughtful conversations around those areas without the team that you see here on the screen. We're led in our efforts by Tiffany Marley, who is our project director, and also Jarl Crocker, who is the director of training and technical assistance. We're very pleased to be joined by Jeannie Chaffin, who is the former OCS director and is a consultant with us on our whole family approach efforts. We also have my great colleague, Courtney Kohler, who is a senior associate in the T&TA department, and Liza Porras, who's another program associate for our department. So I'm getting ready to turn things over to our wonderful colleagues and partners in this work, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, or NAEH, or the Alliance. They've really been great thought partners with us in this conversation around homelessness and what CAP agencies across the country are doing. We've been just thrilled and excited to work with them over the last 3 years, looking at different kind of focus areas or target populations for homelessness, and how community action agencies can think about some of those innovative ways to address these problems that we're seeing in our communities, how we can serve some of those more underserved populations better, and how we can leverage our position as community organizations to really create some collective impact around this work. So our facilitator from NAEH today is Mary Gable, who is the Program and Policy Analyst, as you see her on the screen, and you see her lovely face here. And Mary, I'm actually going to turn things over to you so you can go ahead and get us started in today's conversation. So whenever you're ready. Thank you, my
everyone. I'm sorry. Hi. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Hyacinth, and hello to everyone on the call, on the webinar. We're just delighted that you're attending the third online meeting of the Alliance's Community Action Partnership Learning Community. As Hyacinth said, I'm Mary Gable. I'm the Rural Homelessness Program and Policy Analyst here at the National Alliance to End Homelessness. My wonderful and super knowledgeable colleagues, Ledger Parker and Rebecca Hickam, are joining us. I'm really excited to have them. Ledger is the Executive Director of Mississippi United to End Homelessness, and Rebecca is the Coordinated Entry System Coordinator from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Welcome to both of you. We're also going to have at the end of the call, at the end of the webinar, during the Q&A, Mike Thomas, who is Rebecca's colleague and Georgia's Continuum of Care Planning Manager. He'll be on the webinar at the end to answer any questions that are specific to Continuum of Care funding. So we're so glad that all of you could take a little time today to learn more about how community action agencies can collaborate with balance of state continuums of care and ending rural homelessness. I'm going to give you a little background information for those of you who are not familiar with all of the continuum of care language. A continuum of care, you'll also hear it called a CoC for short. It's a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing and services funding for homeless families and individuals. CoCs represent communities of all kinds, including major cities, suburbs, and rural areas. Balance of state continuums of care, those are also called BOS CoCs. There are a lot of acronyms in our world, I know. They generally cover rural areas of the state, but some may also include at least one urban or suburban center. Now, the Alliance is working closely with Community Action Partnership because we believe that coupling the expertise and resources of homeless assistance programs and local community action agencies can help us make more progress in ending homelessness than we can do alone. Community action agencies have a presence in many rural areas, and we know that in these areas, that's where help to address homelessness is very scarce, and they can play such a critical role in helping to solve homelessness. Of course, many community action agencies are already taking a leadership role, and we want to learn from them, just as we want to explore new ways community action agencies and homeless service systems can be coordinating. Now, this webinar is one part of a larger ongoing effort to explore how we might collaborate. The presentations you'll hear today were really popular presentations at our last conference, and they adapted them to address the community action partnership and how you guys can be involved. They helped us to inform ongoing discussions on how to address rural homelessness, and we want to involve community action agencies in that conversation. We're also excited that later this month, our colleague, Kay Mosier-McDivitt, will be presenting on lessons learned on addressing rural homelessness at the Community Action Partnership Leadership Summit in Denver. Now, before I get to the agenda, I just wanted to get to a housekeeping tip. I'm actually anticipating we have great attendance on this webinar, but I'm also anticipating that because it's August and prime vacation season, people may be listening to this webinar in September and wish they had an opportunity to submit a question. So we're going to invite you, of course, to reach out to the panelists on this webinar, but also consider emailing us at the Alliance, and we can develop some FAQ answers to accompany the webinar after today. Now, just to go through the agenda again, we're first going to have Ledger Parker of the Mississippi Balance of State CoC, and he's going to talk about why it makes sense for community action agencies to work with CoC-funded agencies and potentially be a CoC lead agency in efforts to end homelessness. Then we'll hear from Rebecca Hickam, who will talk about her Balance of State CoC and how it's collaborating with community action agencies and their coordinated entry system. And finally, we'll have that Q&A session. So, and we may also have people from Balance of State CoCs on the webinar. So we want to hear from all of you about how community action agencies and Balance of State CoCs are partnering to end homelessness. And with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Ledger. Welcome, Ledger.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. So, hello everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. And I'm making sure I have control of the slideshow. We're ready to go. Okay, so I work for...
So you're good to go.
All right, thank you. I work for Mississippi United to End Homelessness. We call it MUTE for short. So one of the things we do is that we are the collaborative applicant and the HMIS lead agency. So a collaborative applicant, we are contracting with the Balance of State CoC in Mississippi to make sure that their application to HUD gets funded every year. And we're in charge of helping lead strategy and work with our governing council of the CoC to ensure that coordinated entry systems are put together that orient homeless people, that assess them where they are, and then try to get them navigated into housing. And then we also, with the HMIS piece, it's the Homeless Management Information System. We run the data for the Balance of State CoC in Mississippi as well, and so we'll delve into what that looks like. So just a little bit about how we're contracted and set up. MUTE is a direct service provider as an agency. It's its own 501c3 nonprofit here in the state of Mississippi. It has grants that it runs and direct service provision, like from the VA, supportive services for veteran families, and grants per diem programs that target homeless veterans to try to connect them to not just housing but also clinical treatment as needed. And then we have Emergency Solutions grant money from the state of Mississippi as well, that we target literally homeless people that are in encampments across the state. And we do that through funded outreach, but we also have funded rapid rehousing programs that put them in the rental assistance units and give them case management. Usually we use what we call a CTI model, and that's just this critical time intervention case management model that connects them to other circles of support and networks of support for them. And we try to get them connected to other mainstream resources, but also some of those personal supports that they can be connected to that are within their own, like, family and friends networks. We also get funding from the Department of Mental Health in Mississippi to work with housing homeless people that have serious mental illness. And so we have our own direct services, and through our own direct services, we rehouse around 350 households a year. We have a staff of just over 30, and we cover, in our contract with the Balance of State CoC, we cover 71 out of Mississippi's 82 counties. You should be able to see on my slide now, there's a map, and it's kind of been compressed now, so I'll make sure you can understand it. We've divided those 71 counties into 6 regional coalitions. That way that we have local decision-making and leadership that's happening in each of their different communities. But those regional coalitions meet monthly, and we only bring all of these CoC members together to Jackson once a year in an annual meeting. Although we're constantly communicating through online meetings and webinars, the regional coalition is supposed to be their opportunity to be able to come together every month. They'll look at HUD guidance. They'll also have a chance, though, to be able to share best practices. One agency presents at each of those coalition meetings, typically every month. We do leadership development sessions in those meetings. And then lastly, we have everyone come around the by name list. So we know every homeless person that's homeless in that area, and we'll have agreements in place where everyone comes together to discuss that list of people. And so we'll actually go through that by name list and make sure that people aren't slipping through the cracks of our different resources and that they're getting connected to care. We do that in 71 counties. If you were to drive across the Mississippi Balanced State, I think it's 244 miles as the crow flies, but it would take you about 7 or 8 hours to drive through our coverage area. And that last bullet that you can't read is just that the yearly household served is typically around 350 folks, and it's been more the past 2 years. This is just Mute's team. Those pictures on the left, it was funny because we went out one night, like at 8 o'clock at night into downtown Jackson to the bus station, and we didn't know that it was like crazy thunderstorms. So when we went out, we got soaked, and so we took a before and after picture and just made sad faces on the second picture. And we have a good group of folks. These are passionate people that are going out to address homelessness across Mississippi, so we're really proud of our team. But I want to talk to you all about why it makes sense for CAP agencies to partner with the CoC and why you guys are such good partners for us. We have multiple community action agencies that are a part of our CoC, so the continuum of care. All of them typically are participating members, but we also have some that are directly funded from the CoC application. In particular, we have 2 rapid rehousing programs that are funded, one with the Multi-County Community Services Agency in Meridian, and another through Bolivar County Community Action Agency in Cleveland. And so we've been able to see the direct service provision of partnering between the CoC and community action agencies pay off. And so what I'm saying is just my observations from a CoC level, seeing those partnerships. Community action agencies have built-in staffing, and I wrote CSVG grants, but they usually have a diverse amount and very diverse funding, and so you guys have all sorts of staffing that a lot of nonprofits may not come to the table with that, and so you bring that staffing to the table, and it's really valuable. And one of the ways that it's valuable is the match resource of being able to use some of the services that you're already funded to provide and matching those with those CoC dollars. The other way is that you have staffing that are, a lot of them have all sorts of certifications and experience that are really valuable to the CoC and to homeless service programs. So not just with the match resource, also just having the staff that have been doing this type of work and working with vulnerable populations, that's a big help for us. Also, I think community action agencies have the needs assessment that they conduct in the community, and it helps guide even the CoC involvement. So you're able to bring your own research and the data y'all have at the community level, and you're able to help the CoC with that by sharing it with them. Furthermore, just the governance structure of community action agencies, I love the diverse representation that community action agencies have on their board, and we greatly appreciate it being shared with the CoC. And so just the board structure and the community involvement representation that happens at a community action agency, we always find that as a benefit, and it's a huge asset for us in working with you all. And then the capacity as an organization. Our community action agencies are rather large, and with that comes all sorts of capacity, because then they're able to leverage the programming that they have that may not be totally targeting our homeless population, but it can still serve our homeless population. Or it creates its own continuum of services as they navigate through housing programs into their own stability. They're able to access programs of the community action agency, and we've seen that happen time and again. There's also a lot of our community action agencies are community housing and development organizations, CHODO, or they just have experience and capacity in development. And so it's been really helpful for us as a CoC to lean on some of that expertise and experience with the community action agencies, going in and actually developing projects, using small CoC grants and leveraging them with other bigger grants like HOME or maybe even housing trust fund monies that you have available or may have available in your state. And then the Head Start program makes the CoC money look really small because Head Start programs are typically pretty big. But that just, to me, when I see that, there's strategic leverage that can happen there. As the CoC is trying to address family homelessness, whether or not you're directly funded by the CSC, you could play an integral part in the CFC's response to family homelessness by making sure that children are enrolled at Head Start and that family has access to the programs that are available at a community action agency that has Head Start or other programming that's similar. The last thing that I'll say as far as why it's a great idea is that we serve 71 overwhelmingly rural counties. There's many counties where there is not a shelter. And there's probably multiple groups of counties in the state of Mississippi where there is not a shelter that without driving an hour and a half. And so we're a statewide service provider, but we've also had to lean on other resources. So in a county where there's not very many resources available or there are zero resources available, typically there is a community action agency that covers that county. And so being able to make referrals there or join together to serve someone where we're providing housing subsidy and housing case management, or we're connecting them to housing counseling and maybe even budget counseling with the community action agency, we've seen just great results come from that. And so just the large rural areas that community action agencies cover have been a huge asset to our work. So how we currently partner with community action agencies, and this is one that I would just, if I could challenge you to do anything, it would be this. Our community action agencies serve as the base of operations for point-in-time counts and for outreach. And so typically we will start with our volunteer groups at community action agencies throughout our coverage area. There's a launch site. So at a point-in-time count, we will have Homeless Connect events. We'll have events at the community action agency where we're providing just a bevy of resources to these people that we're bucking in from homeless encampments, but are also coming in from emergency shelters as well. So not just working the point-in-time count, which is it's a once-a-year thing, trying to count all of the homeless, both sheltered and unsheltered, in a coverage area, and you're doing it within the last 10 days of January. We could have a whole webinar on that. But really the ongoing effort of trying to conduct outreach into homeless encampments all around the community. And for us, the community action agencies have been a vital partner in that. They help facilitate that work. And then also the outreach piece with CAP, it allows us to have that direct referral from the homeless encampment to coordinated entry, which will typically involve the community action agency. And so it's been really vital to have them join into the outreach teams, help facilitate those teams, because then they're able to take referrals from those efforts. And outreach happens at least monthly in every community in our balance of state coverage area. Many of them actually go once a week or bi-weekly. We've also used them for housing and emergency shelter. Multiple community action agencies in our coverage area have their own emergency shelters that they've built, and that's helped us because it allows us to give somebody a safe shelter bed to stay in when they're identified in outreach. And we see that as, that's a transition bed for us. We're putting them into shelter temporarily while we're moving them into a rapid rehousing unit. So community action agencies have been able to help us with the shelter component for sure. Some of them even have hotel-motel vouchers that they're able to offer our folks. But they also help with the rapid rehousing piece. Like I said, 2 of our agencies actually get direct CoC funding for rapid rehousing, but the others help in other ways. They're able to share landlord networks with us. We're able to access housing that they've developed, affordable housing that they developed, and we can connect our clients to. Or they're able to use some of their utility assistance programs to help pay a utility deposit for our folks. Or if they get behind on a utility payment, being able to make that payment for them. And then the case management services is just, there's a huge amount of case management services that are offered at most of our agencies where we're able to go connect them. Like I said, it could be financial counseling, it could be working to get them into health care or even mental health care. And a lot of that's available to these one-stop shop dynamics with community action agencies in our area. So they help with emergency end for sure, but they also help us in rapid rehousing. And we've seen some of our people start in rapid rehousing, move into permanent supportive housing, and then they've gone into home ownership through counseling of the community action agencies. So I think it makes sense for you guys to partner with the CSCs. You could write a small CSC grant when it's leveraged with the services that you've already offered or provided, it just has a tremendous impact on the community. And so, you know, a lot of your CSC applications, they're limited in how much they're ever going to get. You know, it'll be a percentage of their renewal demand, which is determined on how well they performed in past years and how much is available through a pro rata amount per county. But they're limited in their funding. So going in for strategic grants, they don't have to be big grants to have a big impact. So you're able to go in for smaller, well, it would be smaller, especially when you compare it with Head Start and other big grants. It would be a smaller grant, but it could have a big impact in the community. And then also, a lot of times, I think the literally homeless population has not been able to access services through the community action agencies, because the community action agencies are a resource for people that come there. But part of what we do in outreach and our CoC housing and our coordinated entry system is we're taking the resources into the encampments, right, where these homeless folks are, trying to connect them there. So it's a great chance for a community action agency to be able to come in and take their services out into the homeless population that they typically would not connect to outside of an advocate making that connection. It also should bring new resources to your agency from other CSC providers. We know that there are CSC-funded programs that are going to be around what you all do, and you may know of that already. But there can be a meaningful connection made, not just with CSC-funded agencies and programs, but also just with CSC members that want the best for the homeless population. They may not be funded by the CSC directly, but they may have large capacity or have vast services that they provide that you now can connect with your homeless population that you're serving, or vulnerable populations that you're serving that are also eligible for their programming at the CSC level. And I do believe for a community action agency that it shows and demonstrates your ability to connect with others. I know that sometimes nonprofits and community services can be siloed off, and so this is a great chance to be able to show how you're connecting with other resources in your community, where you can, where you're able to say, hey, we've worked with this person, and multiple vendors. The other reason is, I mean, obviously, I think it gets good, you get good publicity by it. I will say, and one of the reasons I encourage outreach so much is because for us, it let us see the gaps in our system. When we started going out in the homeless encampments and meeting people that were actually literally homeless, we got to see that no matter how good our system was, if it did not reach out to them and connect them meaningfully to services, that it wasn't good enough. And so the other side of that is whenever you start conducting outreach and people see you out there and they start seeing homeless people go into housing, it gets people's attention as well. When they see folks conducting an assessment, we call it the Vulnerability Index, Services Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. When they see that happening in their community, people find it interesting and want to find out more about it. All of that to say, you can get media coverage by targeting the literally homeless population and trying to get them into services that they may be eligible for. So those are just two of our recent stories that we had. But I want to say on the Delta Democrat, that was the mayor was with us of that Delta town, and the community action agency that serves that area, they were also there with their staff as well. So it's just this great time to be able to help homeless people, but also it was really good networking time for a community action agency to meet with the municipal staff and the mayor himself and be able to, I think, have that face time and share their stories. So potential problems that I think could come up with the partnership between a CoC and community action agencies. And let me just say this, every other partnership, any other agency that we would want to partner with at the CoC level would also have these exact same problems. But there's the chance that you could apply for and be funded by CoC programs or by CoC dollars without really knowing or trying to follow through on the goals of the CoC. And so the ways that we've seen that come up, community action agencies have a population that they're serving. They have an impoverished population typically that they're trying to work with, but the impoverished population doesn't necessarily translate to being the homeless population. And so, you know, a lot of people serve homeless, but we always say here that they've been homeless for 30 minutes. They got kicked out. They have no place to go tonight. But the CoC's definition of homelessness is really focused in on people that have been in a place not meant for human habitation or an emergency shelter. And so a lot of times there's confusion around the population that you're trying to serve. And community action agencies have been working with people that they're homeless because they don't have anywhere to go tonight, where the CoC is, they're working on that through prevention, but they're also working on, and focusing on the literally homeless population, people in a place not meant for human habitation, emergency shelter. So that was one of the biggest areas that we had to educate on. Also, not utilizing or implementing the housing first model. And so for those of you that don't know, and I'm sure you've heard this in a webinar, so I won't take much of your time, but we believe that housing someone first and then connecting them to the needed services is the best model. Research shows us that it has better outcomes and that it's more efficient than trying to leave someone in homelessness before we rehouse them. And so because that's a newer intervention and service provision model, a lot of longer agencies that have existed for a longer time and have their own practices set up, it's a bit of a learning curve. So it's not just community action agencies. Somebody that's been doing housing with homeless for years and decades may have to kind of grow into housing first, but it's required in our CoC, and so it was a sharp learning curve for the people that got direct funding, because we were telling them, hey, not only are you going to focus on this population, but we're going to house them first. And I will tell you this, housing first, and I think John Kuhn with SSVF says this, housing first is not housing only. We house them while we are connecting them to services. So we've had times where our assertive community treatment teams with the Department of Mental Health, they meet us at the house to meet the client and a welcome home party. So we welcome them home, and then we also have a treatment team that's there trying to get them acclimated, not only into their housing, but into true services that are going to help them maintain that housing and help them to be healthy, both physically, mentally, emotionally. So the other piece of this is that because most CoCs have coordinated entry, there should be prioritization coming out of that. There should be people that are identified in homelessness that are now prioritized according to whatever assessment your CoC is using. And so some of the confusion has come in. Listen, most community action agencies have this one-stop shop model, and they want to be able to help somebody that walks in the door. But if you're committed to your CoC and that coordinated entry system, you would enter them into that system and you would serve them however they're prioritized according to the system. And so that by name list that we talked about, it's given in order. The people at the top are the most vulnerable in homelessness, the most likely to die. And one of the ways that we talked about this with our CAP folks in each community is that they've had someone homeless die in their community. Sadly, someone's died recently. And so what we've been able to say is, hey, we want to target that person to prevent that from happening. And we're going to still get to your folks, but we're trying to get the most vulnerable housed first. And then lastly, I will say that, you've got somebody that's been doing housing counseling, or they've been doing budget counseling, and you want to be able to pay them out of these CoC dollars. You can when that service is applicable to the population. But I do think there's times where we're trying to pay someone's salary with a service in our agency, and we're not actually doing what the CoC dollars were meant to do. And so when you add all these together, you have a problem for the CoC and the CAP agency. But if you look at this on the front end and hey, we're going to try to serve the right folks, we're going to try to serve them the right way, in the right order, with the right people, then I think that you're going to be good to go. And this CoC program could be really good for your agency and for homeless people and for the CoC in your area. And then I put here lackluster outreach, because when you have a one-stop shop model, the question becomes, if everyone's already coming to us, why should we go out to anyone? And that's going to be the challenge. And that's why my biggest encouragement, it's really, I think, a rudimentary thing, is go out and go into homeless encampments and meet these people out there. For us, it's been a huge mind change for everyone that we've taken out there, and even for executive directors of nonprofits. Because when you go see the need that's out there, you'll commit to it. You'll commit to serving it through the coordinated entry system. And then the CoC program, if you're not careful, if it doesn't align with the mission that you have locally with your agency, then it can become the thorn in the side of the agency, and no one's going to be happy there. Clients aren't going to be served as well. your staff aren't going to be happy, the CSC staff and that board and volunteers are not going to be as happy, and ultimately, you know, the community action agency is not going to be happy either. And so I think being on board with the goals of the CoC and seeing how they relate to you as a community action agency, I think will help you be on board as you implement the program, which is, at times is going to be difficult. But if you're committed to the mission, then I believe you're going to be on board with it. So I think it makes sense for the CSCs and the CAP folks to be able to work together, whether or not you're CSC funded. And so if you're not already a part of your CSC in your area, I would just recommend that you start reaching out to that leadership, try to be involved, because they need you. They need your services and your capacity, and I do believe that they can benefit you as well. I believe the CSC will benefit the work that you're trying to do to serve your population in your area. And so I will say that our governing council at MUTE, it's a 15-member governing council. It's got representation from the VA Medical Center. It's got representation from the Department of Mental Health, from HIV providers, domestic violence, victim service providers. They have a whole slew of folks that represent state agencies, and I do believe that they would be beneficial to the Community Action Agency. There's no doubt in my mind that Community Action would be helpful for our CSC and the Governing Council. And ultimately, you know, if you hit some of those roadblocks and barriers, you can remember what Thomas Edison said, that he hasn't failed. He's just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And there's not going to be a way that's perfect. But I would just encourage you to start working with your CSC in just a partnership. Some of you, I think you may need to go in for funding with them. And it's not always going to go smoothly, but I do believe we're heading in the right direction and we're helping people all along the way. So that's me, and I guess I'll hand it over to Mr. Kinley now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation, Ledger. We really appreciate hearing that perspective, and I'll share, I got a lot of comments in the chat about how this is a really timely conversation for a lot of community action agencies, and that it's helpful to hear from your perspective what we can do, and also, more importantly, for some not do, to make sure that we can facilitate those relationships and work together. So thank you so much. So with that, I think actually Rebecca Hickam is going to be talking to us next about her perspective from her work. So Rebecca, whenever you're ready, I think you have control of the slides and you can get started. And you might be muted, so I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes. Hello. My name is Rebecca Hickam. I am the Coordinated Entry System Coordinator. I work for the Georgia Department of Community Affairs in the Office of Homeless and Special Needs. So we have a lot of housing programs that live under the Homeless and Special Needs Office here at DCA. One of those is the Georgia Balanced Estate Continuum of Care, and you'll see quite a few others here. One that I'll talk to you a little bit about today is the Emergency Solutions Grants Program. One is a reentry partnership housing, which is something that our governor really has pushed to get people who are exiting prisons and jails housed. We have a home access program. We've got HUD 811, and we've got HOPWA, which is Housing Opportunities for Persons with HIV and AIDS. So we are lucky in that all of these programs are really managed under one roof, and that makes collaboration really easy. If I want to collaborate with one of these other programs, I walk down the hall and talk to the coordinator. So we're really lucky in that, and I think that we've done some really great things because of it. And just to give you a little bit of a picture of more of what our role is in some of those projects and programs is we fund agencies throughout the state of Georgia providing housing and services. We manage contracts and reimbursements. For some of those programs, we monitor performance, provide training and technical assistance to project sponsors, and we try to link consumers to services where they live. So a little bit about the Georgia Balance of State Continuum of Care. So we have 9 continuum of cares in the state of Georgia. And we are the Balance of State. We are 152 of 159 counties. I believe that's the 2nd largest CoC in the nation, so we're pretty big. And I'll show you a map in a second, but we have 1 or 2 urban areas. We've got some suburban areas that are right outside of the metro Atlanta area, but for the most part, we are very rural. And in those rural parts, there are some resource deserts. We are the Department of Community Affairs is the collaborative applicant for the Balance of State Continuum of Care. And unlike Mississippi Balance of State, we are not a direct service provider, and we do not have clearly defined regions or really local leadership in our CoC. We are working on that through our coordinated entry efforts, which I'll talk about in a second. So just to give you a little bit about the kind of a picture, a snapshot of the money that we received through that CoC competition, roughly $17 million, 56 permanent supportive housing projects, 17 rapid rehousing projects, and then we have some grants. We have a coordinated entry grant for about $190,000. We have a CoC planning grant, and we are also DCA is also the HMIS lead agency, so we have a grant for that as well. So here is a map of our state. This is a population map. So the darker the area, the more populated that area is. And those blue X's that you're seeing on the screen are the other continuum of cares in the state. So we do not provide, the continuum of care does not cover those areas which have those blue X's. So you see those light green or yellow colors, those are the majority of our state, and those are the most rural areas of the state. I think it's always good to have some context when we're going through this. Okay, so again, a little bit more context. These are our 2017 point-in-time count numbers. So on the night of the point-in-time count, in January of 2017, we had about 3,700 people who were literally homeless. Roughly half of those were unsheltered and half of those were sheltered. And then this is our hit count, which gives you an idea of the beds in our community. So we have, in the CoC, excuse me. So we had 1,651 emergency shelter beds, 815 transitional housing beds, about 1,200 rapid rehousing, and 2,400 permanent supportive housing. So we have a good bit of permanent supportive housing. And a little over half of those are funded by HUD. Okay, so we have, like I said earlier, we have some great partnerships. And one of those partnerships that has been really instrumental, especially in our coordinated entry efforts, is partnering with the Emergency Solutions grants. So a lot of our recipients of CoC funds also get ESG funds. So the Emergency Solution Grants Program, it maintains support for a crisis response system through emergency shelters, but places an emphasis on identifying and preventing homelessness and returning those who experience homelessness back into the community as quickly as possible. So this lines up with kind of what we're charged with as a CoC, which is making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And here are the eligible activities under the federal funds. One of those is street outreach, which Ledger talked a good bit about, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and funding for data entry in the HMIS system, or Homeless Management Information System. Something that is a little bit unique to us is that we are able to pair some state housing dollars within that ESG competition, and we fund some different things with that. One of those are hotel motel vouchers, which is emergency shelter. We provide supportive services, As you can see, there's some different things that fall under that: employment, childcare, transportation. These are things that certainly CAP agencies understand. HMIS, again, and able to fund training for sub-grantees. So we have a lot of community action agencies in the balance of state who take advantage of these ESG funds. As you can see, we just finished up the 2018 ESG competition, and these are the agencies that, the community action agencies that were funded and the type of funding that they receive. As you can see, there are a lot of different types of funding: homeless prevention, rapid rehousing, supportive services, pretty much everything that is an eligible expense community action agencies across their state have taken advantage of. So all in all, community action agencies will receive about $1 million in ESG dollars for the 2018-2019 grant year. We fund one community action agency for the past CoC competition, and we have one community action agency who has applied for the upcoming 2018-2019 year. So as you can see, we do have a lot more community action agencies who take advantage of that those ESG funds as opposed to the CoC funds. And our ESG team has worked really hard with community action agencies to think creatively about how to meet the 100% match requirement that some of those ESG grants require. I think sometimes when we're applying for funds, we think of the fact that we have to have a cash match for everything that we apply for. And that's not always the case. And sometimes we don't think about what we can use as in-kind match for that. So we've had a really great dialogue with community action agencies who've said, hey, I want to apply for these funds, but I don't have cash match. And there's been a lot of conversation about, okay, let's think creatively about how we can meet that match. If you're applying for this for the coordinated entry funds, are you using an office space? Are you providing, you know, staffing that will be working on this? Lots of creative things. I think our ESG team never wants match to be the reason why someone doesn't apply for ESG dollars. So it's a really good way. If you're thinking about applying for ESG dollars, certainly I would say reach out to who is administering those funds if match is you think match is a barrier for applying. So one other cool thing that our ESG team did last year was create a targeted outreach grant. As you saw with that map, we have a lot of rural areas. And with those rural areas, less services, the more rural it is. And as Ledger mentioned, that makes it hard to know who's experiencing homelessness in the community because there aren't a lot of boots on the ground. So the ESG team created an opportunity for agencies to apply for ESG outreach funds that would be match-free for their first year, and it was targeted to the most rural and underserved parts of the state. We'll talk a little bit about our struggles with point-in-time counts later, but we traditionally have not always had a good idea of how many people and who those people are experiencing homelessness in these areas. We might have an agency commit to count a county, and we only get a city count just because of capacity. There's not a lot of people who are able to do the count. We actually had one community action agency who applied for those funds, and they were awarded those outreach funds. And they became one of our coordinated entry lead agencies. And it has been great to have them doing that outreach when they're starting up these coordinated entry efforts. it's really easy to have a handle on who is experiencing homelessness in that community, and that was certainly a win. I think we wish that more folks had applied for those, especially community action agencies, but we can certainly count that as a win. So I believe that you guys spent some time talking about coordinated entry in one of the past webinars, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Coordinated entry is a streamlined system that provides quick access to individuals and families who are seeking housing assistance. And there's a coordinated referral and housing placement process. CoCs use a standard assessment as a part of this process. We're assessing vulnerability. And households who have the highest needs and the most barriers are prioritized for access to available housing programs as those vacancies occur. So we have had a really fun time getting our coordinated entry up and running. We started our planning efforts last January, so January 2017, I came on board right at the end of that month. And with 152 counties being mostly rural, it was a little bit challenging. But we got a lot done in this first year and a half. So as of now, we have 5 communities who have coordinated entry implementation. And we have 4 additional communities who are in the planning stage, and then another who is about to start these planning efforts. And we think that by the end of the year, by the end of this year, that we'll have 10 sites who have full implementation. And the remainder of our 3 to 5 sites will begin planning in early 2019. Our coordinated entry implementations, some of those cover one county, some of those cover a multi-county area. And those that do not cover multiple counties at this time are initially, they're going to grow to cover more counties. Because we did not have that regional approach, we didn't have those regions already set up, and we didn't have a formal local leadership, we had a little bit of a tough time figuring out, okay, how is this going to work? We can't have 152 coordinated entry systems in 152 counties. So we targeted agencies that we knew had a great grasp on their community. They understood their community. They had a lot of partners in that community and partnered with them to create this local planning effort. And we've been lucky to partner with a lot of community action agencies in that process. (152 counties. Each of those counties have different resources, needs, and partners. We know that one size does not fit all in terms of how a system is going to run. So we decided that we were going to let communities plan on a local level. And that turned into a regular planning meeting in communities. And it wasn't just service providers who were a part of this effort. It was local governments, it was hospitals, the school systems, the VA. We found that through this process, the collaboration in communities was really increased. More partners than ever before were brought to the table. People who might not have had a voice in how the system was running before had a voice now. And I think community agencies were a huge part of that. And we'll talk about, well, let's go ahead and flip this here. So community action agencies are in leadership positions in 2 of our current implementation sites. So that means that they are the lead agency for that coordinated entry. They are the access point in that community. They are the ones administering the assessment, making the referrals, managing the prioritization list. They are the ones who are running those case conferencing meetings where we're talking about hard to serve households. We have an additional site that's in the planning stage now, and a community action agency is the lead agency in that site as well. In all of our implementations, community action agencies are at the table. Because most of our community action agencies serve a multiple county area, it was a win-win for us. They already had a boot on the ground in multiple county area. They already had connections in those communities, a lot of the stuff that Ledger has already said. And we were able to partner with them to start the planning efforts. They had strong partnerships already, so it was easy for a community action agency to say, hey, we're leading the efforts on creating a system that makes it easier for people to get access to homeless services. And people bought into that, and they trusted the leadership in these agencies and came to the table. The great thing about having local planning efforts is that an agency can decide their role. We as the state are not going into communities and saying, well, you must be the lead agency. You must do this. You must run your coordinated entry system like this. It was based on what the community already had in place, what they thought and knew about their community and how their system already run, and making that better. The cool thing also about both our CoC and ESG competition is that participating in the coordinated entry system meant that you got points awarded in these competitions. So that means that when agencies are applying for funds in the CoC program competition and in the ESG competition, if they were a part of those coordinated entry efforts, then they were awarded points for that and had a better chance of getting those funds. Community action agencies, again, as Ledger has already said, already act as an access point for services in communities, especially in rural areas. You already serve this population, you know these people. Working as a system means more options for the clients you already serve. You have multiple programs, multiple funding streams, and that means that somebody who isn't literally homeless may walk into your agency if you're an access point for coordinated entry, and just because they may not be eligible for these HUD-funded homeless programs, they may be eligible for something else. The thing that we have learned working in rural communities is that diversion is key. There are never enough funds, homeless funds, to serve everyone who's experiencing homelessness in that community at that time. And so we have to rely on our creativity as case managers and social workers and service providers to empower a person to self-solve. And we've learned a lot from community action agencies in that process because, man, the people on the ground at the community action agencies I've had the pleasure of working with know how to empower individuals, know how to walk them through problem solving for themselves. And so through our process of the last year planning in these communities, we've learned a lot about diversion, and we've learned who does it well and community actions have. So that's really been a win for us, and we have taken that and really started to focus more on how we can formalize diversion in our coordinated entry system throughout the state. Community action agencies are bridge builders. Kind of already talked about that, but I think it's important to emphasize that oftentimes we, as service providers, feel alone in what we do. And in my experience, community action agencies have not sat in that feeling and have created bridges for agency-to-agency partnerships and bridges for the clients that they serve, making sure that if one person can't serve, then somebody else can. One of the wins that came out of partnering with community action agencies to implement coordinated entry was the opportunity for community action agencies and other agencies who are part of the planning process to have a chance to apply for new funds. A lot of the programs that are kind of under the umbrella of our office, some people haven't heard of, so it was a chance to talk about that. If it's not to apply for the funds, it's to connect people that you're already serving to those funds as well. So those are just some of the wins that we've had in partnering with community action agencies through our coordinated entry planning efforts. Another way in which we've, and again, Ledger mentioned this as well, one of the ways that we've partnered with community action agencies is through our PIT count. In the past, we focused on getting as many counties counted as possible, but that's really hard when you have 152 counties. So now we're trying to focus on the quality of those counts over the quantity. So we are kind of focusing on a smaller number of communities and doing really good counts, making sure that we count all areas of the county and have a really great grasp on who was homeless at that time. We've also gone from paper surveys to an app, which we've got a lot of positive feedback on. We're providing more training and technical assistance to count coordinators, which often are community action agencies, on how to engage the community to volunteer to administer that count. We know that having an accurate count of how many people are experiencing homelessness and who those people are, it helps us right-size our system. We don't know how much rapid rehousing we need, how much current supportive housing we need, how much shelter we need if we don't have a grasp on the amount of people who are experiencing homelessness at that time in our community. And so this has been one of the reasons why we've started focusing on our PIT count more. And again, community action agencies have played a very important role in that. One, that they have a footprint, generally in a multi-city and county coverage area. They have connections for volunteers. They have partners in the community and really good at organizing the troops. Know your community and the people experiencing homelessness in your community. You know where they hang out. You know where the encampments are. So it has really been a win for us to partner for CoC, to partner with community action agencies to help us do that PIT count. And that is all that I have. I provided some contact information for my colleague and I provided our continuum of care program coordinator as well as our ESG program coordinator. If you have any specific questions about those programs, you can certainly reach out to me, but they also would be able to answer those. So I think that's it for me.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. We appreciate that conversation, and again, to hear yet another perspective on how great we are. But thinking about how, again, you can leverage and utilize community action agencies' work that they're already doing, although we might not specifically focus in on homelessness work. We're already doing a lot of the groundwork, and like you said, because of the variety of programs that we offer, we have those kind of inroads to those vulnerable populations that can really help organizations like yours and others think about how to do that collective impact work in this space and to serve, you know, people who are experiencing homelessness more effectively. So thank you very much for that. Let's see. So I'm going to skip ahead to the slides. You can see their wonderful logo. And I think, Mary, it's going to go back to you to kind of kick us off on lessons learned and get us started with our questions. So whenever you're ready, Mary.
Thanks so much, Hyacinth. And thank you so much for those great presentations, Ledger and Rebecca. They were awesome. Now I'd like to turn to our Q&A segment. And as you can see here during the Q&A, we'd love to hear examples of how community action agencies and balance of state CoCs are collaborating or how you'd like to partner in ending homelessness. And meanwhile, you should also consider contacting myself or my wonderful Alliance colleague, Sharon McDonald, in the future with any more ideas or questions, and our contact information is on there. Sharon actually couldn't make it on to the webinar today. She's going to be listening to this after we're done. So, and her email is smcdonald@naeh.org, and mine is mgable@naeh.org. So we got a few questions, and we're really excited about that. And I'm going to kick it off with a couple related questions. So for Ledger, Rebecca, and even Mike, how would community action agencies, or who would community action agencies talk to in connecting with the CoC, and also how would Balance of State CoCs, or who would Balance of State CoCs talk to in connecting with the community action agencies, and how would you all find each other?
So I'm not sure if I'm muted or not. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can go, Rebecca.
Go ahead, Ledger. Go ahead.
All right, I was just going to say, yeah, you want to find out who the collaborative applicant is probably for your CoC. Most of that's going to be available on HUD's website, so you'll be able to get on and find that. If you Google it, don't type in CoC, because apparently there's a game called Clash of Clans that's going to come up. But yeah, you want to try to find the collaborative applicant for your CoC. They're typically going to be either the point of contact, or they'll be able to get you in the direction of who you need to talk to about membership and being a part of the CoC.
Yes, and on the other side of that, how would you know who to contact at community action agencies? If I don't know who, if there is a community action agency that serves a specific county, I go to my state's community action website. So I type into my Google search box, Georgia Community Action Partnership, and on there it has an interactive map of all of the community action agencies and who their local leadership is. So I took that route.
And I can also add in, from the partnerships perspective, if you go to our website, we actually have a feature where if you put in your zip code, it'll actually tell you the community action agencies, and you can set the range that you're looking for, but it can show you on a lot of different levels the community action agencies that are available in your state, and it'll give you the direct contact information to access them. So.
And this is Mary, and I was just wondering, Hyacinth, if you have any questions from the attendees, or I have some other questions I could also ask.
I think you can keep going ahead with your questions. Okay. I'm trying to share your link in the chat. But once I do
okay,
that,
great. It's a very long link. I just found the link for the CoC contacts, and I probably should have found a much shorter link for you, so I apologize for that. Yeah, so we also were wondering what the goals of the CoC might be in doing this partnership.
I think that we are working on a systems approach to everything that we do. Like I mentioned, and like Ledger mentioned, and I think Mary talked about a little bit, we have a tendency to work in silos and have blinders on, and we can only focus on what we're doing with the clients that we serve that day. Sometimes we're just not able to work collaboratively with the people around us. So one of the things that we've really trying to focus on is a systems approach to ending homelessness. So where really the burden of ending homelessness isn't on one agency, it's on a community. We know that funds go farther when we're working together. We think smarter, we think smarter. I'll just go with that, about funding. And ultimately, the people that we serve, if we're working together, we can really focus on who we serve and making sure that they have an easier time and getting connected to resources, and we do a better job at serving them. And community action agencies, again, they do that. They have a really good grasp on working as a system, and so in working with community action agencies, we've been able to start the efforts in a lot of communities and thinking towards that systems approach.
I would just add to that you know, there's a federal strategic plan in ending homelessness. They had one, USFH, the federal partners put it together, and what we were trying to do was we were trying to end veteran homelessness, end chronic homelessness, and end family homelessness. They've updated that now to a new federal plan these years later, and it still involves ending veteran homelessness, ending chronic homelessness. These are people that are disabled and homeless, homelessness with families, with children, and then also there's homelessness amongst unaccompanied youth and then other individuals. And so you're looking at, you know, some populations that you may be able to target in a CoC grant that you would apply for, and they would be in line with the goals of the CoC. But also all of that is on top of what Rebecca was saying with the systems approach, and she's right at 100% about that.
That's great. This is Mary again. I'll just keep going with another question, if that's okay with you, Hyacinth.
Sure. I have one in to go right after you, so go ahead with yours.
Okay, great. So, so what changes would a community action agency have to make in order to work with the CoC, and also what ways could you partner, or could a community action agency partner without becoming a CoC-funded agency?
Okay, I'll jump in again. Okay, so ways that I believe they may have to change, I think it would be, these are pretty simple changes that you'd have to make. I would want executive leadership of the Community Action Agency to be a part of some of the CoC functions and governance. I think it helps them to, if you have that buy-in, then I think it will help inform the implementation of the CoC program. So I do believe that having that executive involvement would be important. Other than that, the fiscal processes and everything that you have as a community action agency, typically they're going to be, you're already bringing that capacity to the table. So I think it's just making sure that you're coming in, learning what the processes are for the CoC, the coordinated entry system, where your clients would be coming from, the types of case management and housing models that should be used. Those are where some of the changes may have to happen, because you're having to now update and evolve programming to meet the needs of the CoC or the standards set by the CoC.
Yeah, and I would say that a way that you can get involved without being funded is certainly coordinated entry. I'm a little biased because that's that's kind of where my lens, because this is what I do every day, but through our coordinated entry efforts, we partner with a lot of unfunded agencies. The more people who come to the table, the better, funded or not funded.
All right, thank you very much for those responses. And I can share one participant question that we've gotten in from the chat for our presenters today. Would you all have any examples or thoughts on CAP advocacy work or the tripartite board composition as a benefit to CoCs? I know, Ledger, you talked a little bit about that in your presentation, but they continue to say, I'm thinking of CAP public sector board representation. Do you all have any suggestions or offers of help in engaging local communities in discussions around affordable housing needs? Any thoughts on that? Or if I need to restate the question, I can do that too. So panelists, any thoughts on that question that was just posed from one of our attendees for today's event?
When I was talking about the appreciation of the diversity and community action agencies board of directors and that governance structure or their organization, I was talking about the way they leverage that board with what we're trying to do in the community. That's pretty much what I have there. I don't know that I have a good example for what the question's asking for.
Sure.
I just know that they've been able to bring, their board is made up of not just leaders of the community, but also representatives of the community. So these are folks that come from, and they come from poverty, or they're in poverty. And so we've been able to get their insight into how we were rolling programs out in their community, and they were able to give input in that way. And so that, for me, that was really valuable because I know that we can easily get removed from that, and that helped us in Meridian and Bolivar County, just for two examples, in Mississippi.
Sure. So, right, and it's, if you have, like, thoughts on how we can leverage that board structure, so I know we have some folks from outside of our network who are joining us today. One of the founding requirements, actually, of community action agencies is that their board has this tripartite structure that is 1/3, like was said, membership of the community, particularly low-income individuals in the community, and then public and private sector individuals coming together. So already from the jump, community action agencies are bringing a diversity of voices to the table to engage in the various work that they're doing. So if there are any other comments or thoughts on how that tripartite board structure can be utilized or leveraged, or maybe how it could be a benefit to COCs would be helpful, but otherwise we can move along if there aren't any other thoughts on that.
I just had one more quick thought, and certainly, again, coordinated entry lens is having, if there's not representation on that board from somebody who's involved in the coordinated entry efforts, I think that could certainly be helpful for both parties, for the COCs and for community action agencies.
Right. And then that attendee followed up to say more that they wanted to more stress that there is an opportunity, if you're thinking about pros and cons for working with CAP agencies in your community, is that board structure, bringing all those different voices to the table can really be a supporting factor in helping continuing the goals and work of your COCs. So that was in addition. So thank you for that, and thank you for your responses to that question. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time because we're nearing an hour and a half for today's event. So I wanted to see if Mary or any of our presenters, if you had any other closing thoughts or comments before we move forward into wrapping up for today.
This is Mary. I just want to thank CAP and thank Ledger and Rebecca for their wonderful presentations, and we look forward to continuing this conversation to try to connect COCs and community action agencies, because we all, it would greatly improve our work, all of our work, I think it sounds like, across the country if we were able to partner. So yeah, let's just continue that conversation, and thanks again for all of your time.
Thank you so much, Mary. And if I don't have any, go ahead.
I was just going to thank everybody for being on the call today, and then also to reach out and do this work. It is work, and so some of you are already, I think, getting motivated to do that. COCs need that, and so I just want to say thank you on behalf of COCs to the CAP folks, because we need you, we need your capacity, and what you're going to bring to the table. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Ledger said. You know, there's a huge shift right now, especially in our CoC, to this new coordinated entry thing, and I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but that I don't think we could have gotten as far as we did this past year and a half in implementing coordinated entry without the wisdom and the partnership that we have with our local community action agencies. So I'm thankful for that, and thank you guys for the work that you do and for letting me share a little bit with you today.
Great. Thank you both, thank all of you for your closing thoughts, and I got a lot of comments in about how some of our CAP agencies on the line have really been able to take a lot away from today's conversation and thinking about those partnerships. So hopefully you guys will be hearing from some of your local community action agencies, maybe that you're not working with yet, but we really appreciate both of you, Ledger and Rebecca, for leading us in this conversation. It seems like people are really walking away with thinking about how they can use it and how they can take what we talked about today back to their communities. So thank you all so much. And Mary, as always, on behalf of NAEH, we really appreciate you all, again, leading us in this conversation and thinking about how we can better leverage our collective strengths as organizations that want to see people do better and have what they need to thrive, and thinking about how we can work together across those different focus areas, across those different programs and services to help people achieve self-sufficiency. So thank you all so much. So a couple of quick things on our behalf from the partnership. You heard today's event. If you want to find resources on homelessness or CoCs or pretty much anything that we've talked about that relates to training and technical assistance, you can find it here in this great database, the CSBG TTA Resource Center. You have the access link there on the screen, and you can see here on the slide some of the various features that we have offered through that, including a consultant bank and a resource bank, which I just mentioned. So check that out if you haven't already. Of course, you're joining us today on Wednesday as a part of our Webinar Wednesday series, but we still have more webinars to keep going through the end of next month through September, and we'll have some more coming in the fall. So please be sure to continue to join us on Wednesdays at 2. That's our normal slot. You can find access information and how to register for those events if you go to our website and you visit our upcoming events page. Also, we would like to let everyone know who joined us today that you can continue in the conversation and look back on past conversations that we had as a part of our Decreasing Homelessness group through Community Action Academy. It's completely free. You can create an account using the information provided on the steps that you see here on the slide, but that's a way to connect with others and our presenters that have engaged with us in this work, again, to follow up on other parts of our conversations that we've had over the course of this learning community group, and to continue to stay connected with the work that community action agencies are doing in this effort, so please join us there. You can see here we have had 3 conversations already, and we have one last one to kind of tide us off and think about as we move forward to closing this year's cohort of the learning community, thinking about what we can do to leverage our work together. We will get back to you on the details of the specifics of that conversation, but please mark your calendars for our next and final event in this LCG for this year, which will be on September 5th at 2 p.m. You can go ahead and register if you'd like to join us, but we'll have more specific content-related details coming in the next few weeks, so please stay tuned. Of course, shameless plug for our annual convention. I think Mary mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we will actually have some of the folks from NAEH joining us to continue a little bit of what we talked about over the course of this learning community group. We'll be joined by our colleague from there, Kay Mosher McDivitt, and she's going to be joining us in that conversation. I want to highlight not just that webinar event, but also, not just that session, but also some of the other offerings that the learning community will have. You can see those here on the screen. Of course, the homelessness one is kind of big and bold there at the bottom. That session is going to be entitled Housing to Address Rural Homelessness in America, Place-Based Strategies for the Changing Landscape of Homelessness. So please be sure to join us for that. And you can see our other offerings here on the screen too. So a lot from the LCRC to talk about and think about. So if you're going to be joining us in Denver, we're really excited to join with you in these conversations and think about the work that we're doing and how we can be more impactful. And finally, here's the contact information not only for myself but the LCRC team. Please feel free to reach out to any and or all of us with your questions, comments, or concerns. We really do want to hear from you and think about how we can continue to work together and we can continue to build that capacity and that impact across the United States through the work of community action. So with that, that is going to conclude today's webinar presentation for today. Thank you all so much for your time and participation. Thank you again to our presenters and to our facilitator from NAEH, and that will conclude today. So thank you for your participation and have a great day.